Hey there, ladies and gents, welcome back to the vlog. My name is Drew, and I am so glad to be back. First, a couple updates for the channel. So, these last couple weeks have been super duper hectic with Food for Group. We just debuted some new tech a couple Wednesdays ago, and we're now on track to be releasing some other cool stuff come end of September. So if you're not already subscribed to the Food for Group Instagram, which is @foodforgroup, definitely go check it out. We've got a big kind of thing planned for the end of the month. We're going to be debuting some even cooler technology, and I think you guys are going to love it. So definitely check that out. And being that these last couple weeks have been hectic, I haven't had much time to make some videos, but now I have some time. I'm sitting down and I'm kind of rewriting the schedule of this channel. So every Saturday is going to be Startup Saturday, so that's where I'm going to do like my startup vlog and startup stories and stuff like that. But I really want to get back into the habit of making like mental health videos, because that's something that I definitely care about, and that kind of also plays into business and startups and stuff like that, but is as much a personal skill as well, and I don't think we talk about mental health nearly enough. So I'm going to be doing Mental Health Monday, which is when I'll be releasing a video on Monday, I should say. So be on the lookout. We have videos coming out now 2 times a week, one on Saturday and one on Monday. So exciting times. And I am sitting down and doing a bunch of videos today so I can get started and get all that up and running. So, today's startup vlog, we are going to be continuing our discussion on time management. And I promised you guys a video where I talk a little bit more about kind of shop talk, or what it takes to get a software project started. So obviously if you're watching this series for just general business advice, like you're starting a landscaping company or salsa or cookies or chocolates or something, then this probably won't be as pertinent to you. I'm really talking to those of you who want to start a software startup, kind of like what I'm working on right now. But of course, if you want to learn more about that, or you're slightly interested, I'm not going to tell you to go away, but just realize this video is going to be a lot of talking shop and a lot about coding and applications and stuff like that. So that out of the way, let's dive right in. So how much time does it take to get a software project from the project or design sort of stage to production and users are actively using it? How long does that take? Well, short answer, roughly 3 to 5 years. Alrighty, so let's dive into that 3 to 5 year timeline that I'm talking about. And before we really get into the nitty gritty of how I got that number, the first thing that you should consider is what kind of an application do you want to develop? And for the sake of this argument, we're going to do just a basic web application. And what a web application is a application that is hosted on a website, or you have a website that has some added features or a feature set that allows you to do something, or is an application of that technology, hence web application. Now, if we were having this conversation 5 years ago, it would have been a different story, because back 5 years ago, cellular networks weren't as nearly as robust as they are now. We barely had 3G networks, and well, I think there was 3G and 4G, but needless to say, not nearly as quick as the web that we have now. And the frameworks and the kind of infrastructure weren't really in place to have the robust web applications that we have now. So back then, it made more sense for you to build an application, compile it into a local executable or a local piece of code, and then put that out on the App Store on iOS or the Google Play Store on Android. So it made more sense to do it back then. But now, since most people have a smartphone and cellular networks and Wi-Fi are way more ubiquitous, or they're available in more places now, it makes more sense to do a web application, because, again, if you have an internet browser and some device that can connect to the internet, you can get to your application and people can use it. And just to give you guys some perspective, if you wanted to do the developer overhead to maintain 3 silos, I guess you can say, of applications, so a web application, an iOS application, and Android application, typically what most businesses do, there's a lot of developer overhead to maintain all 3 of these and make sure that it's consistent. To give you some perspective, there may be a team of 10 or 15 iOS developers that just work on iOS at some of the bigger companies. So be honest with yourself, it's probably not going to be the case that you're going to be able to do all 3 of them at one time, especially if you're a one-man show. But I think that starting with a web application is definitely a good start. So with that in mind, let's talk a little bit about web applications and how they work. Now bear in mind, you can use these concepts that I'm about to talk to you to apply to any sort of project. Like if you're working on embedded systems or blockchain or something like that, you can use these same frameworks or these same kind of analyses to figure out a timeline for your project. But I know web applications because I've been working on web applications for a while, and so that's where I'm speaking from. So when you have a web application, typically you have a front end and a back end. So the front end is going to be the stuff that your user interacts with, the client side, as some people call it. Now, there are some other stuff that falls into the purview of front end, but for the sake of argument, we're just going to say that's going to encompass user interface and user experience, UI, UX, as you sometimes hear it termed. What that encompasses is all of the sort of aesthetics of your website, the layout, the topography, how the topography is balanced, organization, flow, all that sort of stuff. Basically anything that the user can do to interact with your site and what that looks like, that's front end. And on the front end, most people are going to be using some combination of HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and Bootstrap. Bootstrap is a framework, so Bootstrap combines the first three, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and it puts it into a nice little library that's responsive, and so if you access your web application on a phone, it looks nice and everything like that. Bootstrap does all that for you. And I'm going to recommend that you use Bootstrap because it saves you literal months of having to write all your own CSS and JavaScript and stuff like that. You just download Bootstrap, you learn the framework, and then you can build stuff out using Bootstrap. So we have four technologies here. We have HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and Bootstrap. So there's four technologies at a minimum that you'll have to learn on the front end. On the back end, you have some sort of application code that's running. So PHP, Rails, Node.js, React. Sometimes React has a little bit of Vue on the back end. Angular is a little bit, Angular and React are kind of in the middle, but all that's to say you have application code, so code that actually processes your data and does stuff with whatever the user is interacting with or makes all of these buttons and shiny stuff work. Then you usually have a database layer, which is where you store all of your data, so usually you'll have like MySQL or MariaDB or SQL Server. Then you have the web server environment, so Apache or any of the like stuff that actually hosts your web application. And then running below all of that is the actual bare metal and the OS of the server that your web application is running on. And this is usually Linux or Windows. So on the back end, you have four. You have your application layer, your database layer, your web server layer, and then you have your OS layer. So four technologies on the front end, four technologies on the back end. At a bare minimum, we have 8 technologies that we have to learn in order to be competent and to start building our web application out. So 8 technologies in total. Now you can do a quick calculation. So if you have no prior coding experience or you're just starting out, then I would add an extra 1 to 2 months to each of these figures. But in general, it takes about 1 to 3 months to get really competent in any of these skills, I guess you can say. So again, if you're starting out programming, it's usually 3 to 5. Or is that correct? Add 2 months. Sorry, I said add 1 month, but add 2 months. So if it's 1 to 3, then it becomes 3 to 5 if you have no prior programming experience. So realistically, it's going to take you at the very least 8 months to learn all of the technology that's involved in developing your web application. Realistically, it's probably going to be closer to 3, so you're thinking about 24 months. That's about 2 years to get really up to speed. And realistically, it's not going to take you 3 whole months to learn HTML. It's pretty easy to pick up. And CSS and JavaScript are pre-compiled with Bootstrap, so you're probably not going to spend as much time learning about those. JavaScript, it depends on how much interaction and how much you're going to be using JavaScript for other stuff. But these two, it's not going to take you 3 months more than likely, and Bootstrap, probably not going to take you 3 months. So there's a give and take to it. Some technologies you're going to pick up a lot more quickly, some technologies are going to take a lot longer because, again, learning Linux and learning Apache, or the nuances of Linux and Apache and the nuances of PHP or Rails or whatever, that's probably going to take a lot longer. So it all balances out. It may take you a month to learn HTML or the syntax of HTML, but it may take you 4 months to learn PHP, so they kind of even out. Now, my one recommendation to you would be, as you're learning these things, start to develop a perspective to how you can use the concepts that you're learning in your application. So, if you have a feature set or something that you're working on and you see an element in HTML, or like you like the way that this table is outlined, and you say, oh, I could really use that table formatting, or I could use this element in my application, then write the code for it right then and there. Because you don't want it to be the case that you learn all of these things and then you have to start writing your application code from scratch. So really start pointing your learning, or as you're learning these things, start pointing it at how can I make this work in my application, or how can I leverage this knowledge to build something in my application. And when you do that, you save a lot of time, because again, you're not just starting from the starting line after 24 months, you've actually got something to show for it. And you can start building on it with the knowledge that you're picking up as you go along. So that's where I got the 3 to 5 year kind of timeline. It's roughly 24 to 40 months to get everything up and running, learning all the technologies for an average web application for one developer that has very little to no prior programming experience. So yeah, that's where I would say. And again, there's other technologies that you'll have to pick up, because more than likely you're not going to want to host all of your own servers. You'll probably use a cloud provider like Azure, DigitalOcean, AWS. So you'll need some time to learn that. So there's some more give and take. So just realize that at a bare minimum, these are the 8 technologies that I think you'll need for developing a successful web application. Realistically, I think the lesson here is take all the technologies that you need to learn, multiply it by 3 months, and then that kind of gives you your timeline to get to a minimum viable product, or get to a part where you're competent enough to develop a minimum viable product. And yeah, again, your results may vary, so I'd love to hear about it though. If you guys are like super speedy coders and you pick up something really quickly, let me know down in the comments below. Or if you have some tips and tricks that will help expedite the process of learning the technologies needed for an application, then definitely leave them down below. I would love to hear about that, and I'm sure there's people here that have those questions and would benefit greatly from your information. So yeah, and we'll finish up this video in the normal way, and that is by me saying, always remember, friends, that you are wanted, you are loved, and you are appreciated. You have a special talent that nobody else has, and the world is waiting on you to bring it out. So muster a little courage, go out into the world, and change it. That's what the world's waiting on. You.